What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the CBB Yapper. Unfortunately, we are approaching the end of the year here, and this will be the final CBB Yapper episode of the regular season. As we do shift into March Madness here, I might switch the schedule up just a little bit just to accommodate for March Madness and those games taking place from Thursday to Sunday. So I might switch up the schedule here, but I have not finalized that schedule yet. I also did want to note that I am considering doing a live stream for the selection show as well, and then completing my bracket after the show completes. Have to look into the logistics of that a little bit first here, but I am looking to do that, so look out for some news to come from me in the upcoming week here about that show as well. However, we do have a bit of a briefer episode here today. We're going to break down some of the games that we pointed out on Thursday's episode as the games to watch for this weekend. And then I'm going to briefly go over some of these conference tournaments, especially for the mid-majors here, and just give who I think will win the conferences, as well as which ones I will be watching. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first game I had pointed out on Thursday's episode as the games to watch here for this weekend was the St. John's and Seton Hall game, and unfortunately for the Pirates, this was most likely their last chance at getting an at-large bid here. Even if they do end up making it to the Big East chip, I still don't think that they would have enough to get them into the tournament at large at this point. Their resume is just horrible with virtually no big wins at all. Their biggest win on the season is probably that NC State game that they won earlier on this year. But yeah, aside from that, they just do not have it. They could have bolstered that chance here with a win and potentially making it to the semifinals of the Big East Championship. I think that would have been a realistic path for them to getting an at-large bid. However, they really fumbled that chance away here in this one. They were just really bad on offense once again, and it seems like that's just a common theme for this Seton Hall team. They shot 1 for 11 from deep as a team, and Staten McRae just really shot them out of the game. I get that he is their best player, and I don't really like to play the blame game here, but he went 4 for 17 on the night with only 11 points. Again, I know he's their best player, so they needed him to carry them through this one if they wanted to win, but yeah, he was just really bad all night on Friday night and just did not have it going at all. I said on Thursday's episode that St. John's would need a much better game from Ejiofor in this one, as he did not really play very well in their first time around, but he was much more back to normal in this one. He had 21 points with 3 blocks on only 12 shots, and he was just really efficient all night and looked like the best player on the floor, which is exactly what the Johnnies needed from him here. Even though this one was close on the scoreboard, it didn't really feel like it at all. The first half was pretty competitive, but the Johnnies just kind of routed them in the second half, in my opinion. Not really the best way to start off our last regular season weekend of college basketball here, but it didn't really get much better, honestly, as we went to Saturday either. I honestly feel like I should have pointed out that Miami-Ohio game, that game looked electric, and that one went down to the wire there, but I wanted to give Seton Hall another chance to show me something, and they certainly did not. Like I said earlier this year, if they wanted a chance at the tournament, winning the conference title is pretty much their only shot now. St. John's should firmly be in as a top 5 seed, but a really ugly loss in the Big East tournament could jeopardize that, but I still think that they will take home at least a top 5 seed in the March Madness tournament coming up here. Moving down the slate here, I had pointed out this Vanderbilt and Tennessee game on Saturday as a game to watch, and this one was just really odd, to be honest. It started out really slow with both teams only combining for 54 points in the first half. I had said on Thursday that I thought a slow pace would favor Tennessee, but it really seemed to be quite the opposite in this one. They are typically a much more defensive-focused team, but they really ran the ball in the second half. After the really slow first half that we mentioned, both teams combined for over double that point total and put up 114 points combined in the second half. It was just a really weird turnaround that I really didn't see coming after such a slow start. However, Vanderbilt really impressed me in this one. Without Ament, this Vols team is obviously not nearly as good as they can be or should be. However, they are still no pushovers, and with guards like Evans and Gillespie, they can give very good teams a run for their money even without Ament on the floor. However, Tyler Tanner was definitely the best player on the floor in this one. He had 25 points on only 9 shots and shot 100% from deep as well. He has been a really fun player to watch this year. I have mentioned him multiple times, and his growth from last year to this year has been pretty spectacular. Last year, he didn't start a single game and averaged just under 6 points per game. This year, he is all the way up at 19 points per game and starting in every single game that he could. That's just a massive jump for the sophomore guard and a really impressive jump for him. I have talked about him a lot this year, as I mentioned, and I really like his game for the college level. I do think he's just a bit too small to make it work in the NBA, but we talk about college basketball on this podcast here. Aside from that, Vanderbilt just really needed this one, to put it bluntly. They have been really up and down all year, and to end the regular season with another win over a ranked opponent will surely help their seed line here as we get to Selection Sunday next week. For Tennessee, they really just need to get Ament back. I think it's just that simple. It does sound like he may return this week for the SEC tournament, according to Rick Barnes, but we will keep tabs on how that develops here as the week goes on. I don't necessarily think that they're a contender with him, but he certainly helps their chances, and without him, I don't think they are really close to it at all. Moving down the Saturday slate here, we had pointed out this St. Louis and George Mason game, and yeah, I got this one completely wrong here. I should have had a much bigger preview for this game because I was certainly sleeping on George Mason pretty heavily here, apparently. I had said on Thursday that I expected a blowout in this one, and while that wasn't necessarily wrong, I was way wrong on who would be getting blown out, and that was the Billikens here on Saturday. St. Louis just got absolutely smoked in this one, just to put it very bluntly. The first half was close for about 10 minutes there, and then George Mason took a 9-point lead into the half. After that, they just ran away with it for the entire second half there. St. Louis just could not get it going from the field at all here on Saturday. Brown and Thames had some good games and tried to keep the Billikens in it, but it wasn't enough as they shot under 40% from the field as a team and just under 17% from deep as well. For a team that shoots over 40% from deep on the year, this was just a really abysmal shooting performance from them. This was a loss that I don't really think the Billikens could afford, to be honest. They should still be clinging on to an at-large bid here, but it certainly hurts their resume a lot. They ended up actually splitting the regular season championship with VCU as well due to this loss, so that is definitely another thing that'll hurt as well. Heading into the A-10 tournament, they are really going to need a run here. I don't think they're necessarily in danger of missing the tournament quite yet, but a slip up against someone like George Washington or Fordham could definitely put that in jeopardy here. For George Mason, this was just an awesome win. I mean, obviously they don't have much to play for this year, and they'll have to win the A-10 tournament to make March Madness, but this performance certainly showed that they can hang with these guys and can potentially do it. I don't think they will, but it will be interesting to see how this momentum carries over into this week and see if they can get a rematch against the Billikens next Saturday. Moving on to the biggest game of the day, which was Duke versus UNC, and I was at least right about this game, but it did end up costing us Duke fans pretty much everything here. Going into this one, I was already upset with the injuries. I obviously never want to see anyone get injured, but seeing Caleb Wilson's injury on Friday was certainly less than ideal. Just absolutely gutting news for another stud around college basketball that we will unfortunately not get to see in March here. Then on Friday night, Pat Gungba showed up on the injured list for Duke as well. This was something that I wasn't necessarily concerned with for this game, but we will absolutely need him for a deep tournament run. Then the entire game was ruined about midway through the first half for many Duke fans like myself when Caleb Foster went down with a foot injury and was very animated on the bench following it, looking like he was in some severe pain there. They ended up taking him back to the locker room and then ruled him out for the rest of the game. Coming back from the locker room to sit on the bench, he had a boot on his foot and ended up leaving the arena on a scooter. Just absolutely horrifying news for Duke fans here. The injury bug seems to be going around here this year, and I just hate every second of it. We are just getting big players taken from us on a weekly basis here, and it just reminds you of how annoying and tragic injuries are. I really feel for both Caleb's here. For Caleb Wilson, this is the only March Madness run he's going to get. He is going to be a top 5 pick, most likely in this upcoming NBA draft, and missing it due to injury is just a pain that I wouldn't wish on anyone. Caleb Foster, on the other hand, will now miss his second March Madness tournament in 3 years if he can't make it back during any point this season, which sounds like that might be the case here for Duke. Of course, it's always next up mentality for these types of injuries, but I am just not sure that this is something Duke can overcome in terms of cutting down the nets here. They're still an elite team, but in terms of winning 6 in a row in March without their veteran leader and floor general, that's just going to be an extremely tough ask to say the least. I'm hoping Caden Boozer and Dame Sarr can pick up right where he left off, but that will be a big ask, like I said. However, I am fully confident in Duke's coaching staff to get them ready to take over the reins if need be. I'm just really, really upset here. If you can't tell by my tone, it's just been a really, really upsetting past 24 hours as a Duke fan, and even so, we haven't been able to enjoy that win over our rivals here due to all these injuries. Back to the game, though. This was exactly what I expected and what I said was going to happen on Thursday's episode, even with Duke being undermanned. If Foster didn't go down, taking the wind out of Duke's sails here, they would have won this one by 25 plus. I completely believe that. However, that injury really took the energy out of the building until that second half sequence when Dame Sarr took the roof off the building and had the Cameron Crazies going nuts. Unfortunately, like I said, this win just does not feel the same as Duke lost its engine and captain. Moving forward, Duke just has to focus on getting fully healthy for the tournament. I think with the injuries, even if Duke does not win the ACC tournament, they deserve the number 1 overall seed. I don't think that's really arguable at this point, but it'll be interesting to see how the committee handles that going forward here. And as we head into next week, I really hope that we get some positive news here on Caleb Foster as well as Pat Gungba, but yeah, most Duke fans are out here expecting the worst. Moving down the slate here to the second to last game we pointed out on Saturday was this Auburn and Alabama game, and this was a much more positive topic for me at least. We have another successful hate watch here in the books, and after all of that talk last week about how good Auburn was and Bruce Pearl trying to boost his son's team into the tournament here, the Tigers came in and got smacked around for 40 full minutes. Auburn led for a grand total of 0 minutes the entire game, and they got dominated from start to finish. The only reason this one was even remotely close at the end is because Alabama ended up taking their feet off the gas pedal. If they had kept it on, they most likely would have won this game by 30 plus. While I certainly don't get everything right, I was definitely glad that I nailed this one. I think this game should certainly put those Auburn tournament conversations to bed here, and if people are still talking about them, their last name is most likely Pearl. This one was just a clear game where Alabama was just way more talented than Auburn, plain and simple. They had the best player on the court by far in Phylon. That kid is just super fun to watch, and he is an absolute dog. I know we don't talk about NBA much here, like I mentioned earlier, but I would love to have that kid play for my team in a heartbeat. He is quickly becoming one of my favorite players to watch here in college this year and just makes college basketball so much fun. Both of these teams here obviously have the SEC tournament still coming up this week as well. Auburn will almost certainly need to win the whole thing in order to get into the tournament unless they can beat 2 juggernauts along the way like Alabama, Arkansas, or Florida. For Alabama, though, they have been playing really well since that Florida blowout from earlier in the year. Aside from that loss to Georgia, I still think that they are really trying to boost their seed line here and could very easily become a top 4 seed come come Selection Sunday next Sunday, especially if they can win off some big wins here this week against maybe a team like Florida or Arkansas. Moving down to the nightcap here, and the last game I had pointed out on Thursday's episode as games to watch for this weekend was this BYU and Texas Tech game. In this one, I was really worried about BYU at first here. They started off really rough in the first half and conceded almost 50 points to Texas Tech there in that first half. However, they completely turned it around in the second, and even though I said Tabansa would need to look like the best player on the floor if BYU wanted to win this one, I actually thought he was third in that regard, or at least following close behind the other two. Robert Wright had an awesome game and really took advantage of some of the mismatches that Texas Tech had for him. He just really relied much more on his drive in this one rather than his outside shot, which seems to be what he typically does in games like this. But he had a really good game, and he really just took what the defense gave him here, and I thought it was a really impressive performance from him. Christian Anderson, on the other hand, was really impressive as well, and arguably the best player on the floor, in my opinion. He is really what is keeping this Texas Tech team alive here after that loss of Toppin. He is so good and a maestro in the pick and roll. I thought he had a really impressive game here, especially in the first half, knocking down 5 threes. I really love his game, and I am really starting to believe that this kid deserves much more love in terms of NBA draft comparisons. He is just so smart. He can shoot the lights out. He's a great passer, knows how to work the pick and roll, and is just a very calm leader. Like, he is always poised. It's hardly seeing any negative emotion out of him on the court, or even emotion at all, to be honest. I think his poise and talents will start to climb him up a lot of NBA draft boards here pretty quickly. BYU definitely needed this one much more than the Red Raiders. They have really struggled here since the injury to Saunders and have been sliding down the seed lines pretty quickly here. However, this win certainly helped their case a lot. They get a really bad Kansas State team here on Tuesday in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, which they certainly cannot afford to lose. Texas Tech earned themselves a bye here, so they will wait to see who they face off against as the week goes on. And for the last episode of the regular season here, it is going to be a little bit of a briefer episode, but I did want to provide a little bit of a different section here. I want to go over some of the mid-major conference tournaments here and who I think will be taking home the at-large bids. Starting out in the America East Conference, this conference tournament has already kicked off here with NJIT, UMBC, Vermont, and UMass Lowell still alive. The championship will take place next Saturday, but we do get the semifinals here on Tuesday night. In this one, I fully expect a matchup between the 1 and 2 seed here, which is going to be a common theme as we look down these conference tournaments here. I think UMBC will take this one home. They have largely dominated this conference all year, sitting at 14-2 in conference play. However, if anyone can take them down, I think it's definitely Vermont. They split the season series this year, each losing their game on the road, and with a neutral court matchup this time, we should get a pretty fantastic game here next Saturday. Of course, definitely do not count out NJIT and UMass Lowell. They have closely followed behind Vermont and UMBC all year in the conference, but I fully expect chalk in this one. Staying in the A's here, I wanted to talk about the American Conference. This is another conference where I have pretty full confidence we are going to see chalk again. USF has dominated the American Conference pretty much the entire year, with the Shockers from Wichita State following closely behind. Their in-season matchups were a little bit odd as both teams beat each other on their home courts. I don't want to continue to be lame here, but I do again think I'm going to side with the favorites in this one. In their games against Wichita State, USF just really didn't seem like their offense showed up. Their first game was much higher scoring going into overtime, but the second matchup really was low scoring and only combined for 124 points here. However, with one of the highest scoring teams in the nation, I don't expect that to continue to happen. I certainly do think that Wichita State can do it and pull off the upset, but they're definitely going to need to have a great offensive game here if they want a chance to pull this one off. Of course, there's obviously no guarantee that they'll even face off against each other. The American Conference is tough this year with a bunch of teams who will definitely be primed and ready to take one of them down, like Tulsa and UAB. Both of those teams were very competitive throughout the year against both of those teams as well, which should set us up for a pretty fun conference tournament here this week. Moving down to the B's, we have the Big Sky, and in this conference, it's a little bit different for me and much more even amongst the teams fighting for the chip here. This championship will take place on Wednesday night and is already currently underway in terms of the tournament, but I wanted to give my prediction before we get too deep into it. In the Big Sky, I really like Northern Colorado here. They may have finished only fourth in the conference, but all of the teams are relatively close to each other in terms of record. They have been playing their best ball of the year here down the stretch with only one loss since the start of February, and that loss was on the road to Eastern Washington, who is another tough team in the conference. Of course, this is just going to be a really competitive conference tournament. I don't think that there's necessarily a heavy favorite in this one, but I think that I'll rock with the Bears in this one. Staying with the big theme here, we'll move out to the Big West. Out in the Big West, there are really only two teams that I can see winning this one, and they are, again, the top two seeds here. I think we will see another 1-2 matchup here for this championship, and it should be an awesome game in my opinion. Hawaii plays a really interesting defense where they don't switch at all, and it is really fun to watch. These teams did face off twice against each other this year as well, splitting the season series, both winning their respective home games. The first matchup, Hawaii was able to keep the pace down and pulled out a low-scoring win. The other time around, it went into overtime in a slightly higher-scoring game. If they end up meeting in the championship, it will all come down to who can control the pace, in my opinion. For conference tournaments being away from home, I think defense is what travels here, so I think I'm going to ride with the 2 seed in this one in the Rainbow Warriors. However, certainly do not sleep on UC San Diego. They are a very dangerous team who took down both UC Irvine and Hawaii this year. If any team aside from the top 2 is going to cut down the nets in this championship, I can see it being UC San Diego. Moving down to the Coastal Athletic Conference here, this conference just got a lot more interesting here due to a result that took place a little bit earlier today. With the number 1 seed getting knocked off here, I don't think it's necessarily fair for me to provide my take after the fact, but I'm going to do it anyways. Prior to that game, I won't sit up here and lie to you. I did have UNC Wilmington snagging the at-large bid here. However, Campbell certainly had other plans. Out of the teams left, though, I think I do have to ride with the team that took down UNC Wilmington a week ago in Charleston. Charleston has only 2 losses since February, and both of them are to two of the better teams in the CAA. This tournament should get interesting here with the number 1 seed getting knocked off, like I said before, but I would give the edge to Charleston to take it home here. Moving down the board here, I have CUSA circled, and I do feel lame here as this seems to be a constant theme here for this section. But this is yet another conference tournament where I am leaning on the 1 seed to take it home. Liberty has just been a pretty consistent face in March Madness for a couple of years here, and they are always well coached with a great defense. They have ran through this conference this year with only 3 slip-ups, and the next closest team is sitting with 7 losses in the conference. I am setting myself up to look pretty bad here, as there is always chaos in these types of tournaments, and going with chalk is probably not the smartest thing to do, but I have full confidence we will see the Flames here again in March Madness. Up next, I have the Horizon League, and maybe this is because I talked myself out of taking another 1 seed here after taking, 3 or 4 in the previous conference tournaments that we discussed, but I actually do have more confidence in the 2 seed in this one. While Wright State is certainly the favorite and has looked like it for most of the year, Robert Morris is very dangerous. They have not lost a game since January and just beat Wright State a couple of weeks ago as well. I just think that they are playing the best out of the teams in this conference right now heading into the tournament here, giving me a slight confidence boost in them over the heavy favorite in Wright State. Moving on here, I have the Ivy League circled, and in this one, it is right back to chalk here for the Big Brains League. Yale, I think, is just clearly the best team in the Ivy League this year, and I don't think that they're really going to have much trouble running through this tournament. They have a really impressive 23-5 record on the year entering the tournament, and they only have 3 losses since the start of 2026. However, one of those losses did come to their biggest competition in the league with a loss to Harvard. Harvard is the only team I think has a realistic shot of taking down Yale in this one, but I certainly don't expect them to do it. They are just about the only team in the Ivy League with a solid road record aside from Yale, which I think will contribute to them having about the only shot at taking down the Bulldogs next weekend. Moving down to the Northeast Conference, and this final is actually already set here, so we have a 50-50 chance in getting this one right, so hopefully we nail this one on the head. However, it is another chalk pick, so please forgive me here. I just think that this Long Island team has a little too much for Mercyhurst in this one. This game takes place on Tuesday night, and I think it could be a fun watch, but with how bad Mercyhurst has been on the road this year, I don't have much confidence in them giving us one. They did take down Long Island earlier on in this year, but it was at home for them. They hold a 5-13 record on the road this year, which seems to be a consistent problem for them. I fully expect Long Island to come into this one and handle business and secure their automatic bid here on Tuesday night, but I'm certainly not going to count Mercyhurst out. They're just going to really need to show up here and probably play their best game of the season if they want to take this one home. And moving down and back to having a little bit more fun here, we won't be going chalk in this one, but I have the SWAC circled. Bethune-Cookman is probably the heavy favorite in this one, but I just think that they have really struggled since mid-February here, losing 3 games in that time frame. They also lost to the team that I do have winning it all in Florida A&M. All of these teams have had some pretty rough years, with only 2 of them holding positive win-loss records. However, they have all struggled on the road pretty widely. With Florida A&M taking Cookman down last week, I just have confidence that they will carry that momentum into the conference tournament here. Of course, all of these teams have their backs against the wall, which should set us up for an interesting tournament here, but I think if I had to lean on anyone to take this one home, it would be Florida A&M. Moving down to the second to last conference I have circled here is the Southland Conference. I have noticed a little bit of a theme in how I'm determining winners through these mid-major conference tournaments, and that is how they have performed on the road. Of course, that's not the only thing I'm considering, but I do think it does play a large part in how teams perform in conference tournaments as well as March Madness itself. In this one, though, I think I am going to go with SF Austin to take the title home. They have been really impressive all year and have only lost 2 games since the start of the new year. One was to McNeese State, the other team that I think they have to worry about in the Southland Conference, but I think that was just due to it being at McNeese. The Cowboys only pulled off a 2-point victory at home there, and while they are undefeated at home, they are only 9-5 on the road, one of those losses coming to SF Austin. Both of those games were very competitive, though. I don't want to make it seem like SF Austin then blew them out at home. They were both very competitive games, and I do think we will get a close game in the championship here, but I do fully expect them both to be there, and if I had to choose one to cut down the nets, I think it would be SF Austin. And before we get into the last conference I have circled here, I did just want to provide a quick note for you guys. There are obviously some conference tournaments and mid-majors that I did not get to in this episode. However, I tried to stay away from the conference tournaments that were either A, already completed, or B, taking place today. Obviously, with the episode coming out at 8 o'clock tonight, I didn't want to make it very confusing for you guys if there were some games that had already taken place. Meanwhile, I'm giving predictions on who I think is going to win the tournament. So I didn't want that to confuse anybody when this episode airs later tonight. However, we do get a championship matchup tonight, meaning Sunday night, in the Summit League that I will be tuned in for. However, I don't really expect a great game in this one, as the spread does sit at 9.5 points. North Dakota State should most likely run away with this one pretty easily here, but this is still a rivalry game for both of these teams. State has been largely impressive all year with only 7 losses, but this is just another one of those conferences that people aren't really expecting much. However, it is March and anything can happen, especially in conference tournaments between rivals. However, that is all I have for today's episode and the last episode of the regular season here. On Thursday, we will go over and break down some of these big conference tournaments and the games that will take place between now and then. As I mentioned, the schedule may be changing up here shortly to accommodate for March Madness, but I should have all that sorted out for you guys by Thursday's episode. Also, keep an eye out for potential news on a Selection Sunday live stream as well. Until then, I appreciate everyone who listened in, and if you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and join us back on Thursday for next episode.